My name is Richard Medhurst. I'm an independent journalist, and I've been covering Julian Assange's extradition case for a couple of years now. So let me bring you up to speed on where his case stands at the moment. And if you're new, you'll find a couple of playlists on the channel where I break the case down day by day in detail. So do check those out. So what we're dealing with here are two separate rulings. These are both issued by the same judge. His name is High Court Justice Jonathan Swift. He apparently delivers swift justice. But my puns aside, these were issued on the 6th of June, and both of them against Julian Assange, or rather not in his favor. So here, I have both of the rulings with me, okay? Let's go through them together. So basically, Julian Assange's legal team had made two appeals. The first against the ruling of the lower court. This is when Vanessa Bretzer was the judge presiding over the court case. And keep in mind, she ruled in his favor back then, and I'll explain why he's appealing that. The other appeal was against Priti Patel, then the Home Secretary, and her decision to extradite Julian Assange, to rubber stamp his extradition to the United States. Okay? So why would Julian Assange appeal against Vanessa Bretzer? Because she essentially saved him from being extradited to the United States, or so it seems. As I told you guys back then, it was a bittersweet victory, right? Because on the one hand, she said that U.S. prisons are far too risky and hazardous, and that plus your mental illness, they'll cause you to commit suicide, right? So there was a suicide risk for Julian Assange, and because of health reasons, she blocked the extradition. But when it comes to the politically motivated charges, oh, you're a spy, oh, you're a hacker, basically the textbook case that any authoritarian regime brings against a journalist they don't like, she said yes, right? So when it comes to the politically motivated charges, she said that she agrees with the United States that Julian Assange is a spy and a hacker, and she even found equivalence in the Official Secrets Act. So she kind of helped to criminalize journalism in the United Kingdom, if it were not already criminalized. What points did Assange appeal? There are 8 points, okay? Let's go through them. So the judge here is saying that you're not allowed to undertake a, quote, general rehearsal of all matters, unquote. So he's basically saying that you are not allowed in an appeal to kind of rerun the entire case, right? Which, in my opinion, that's not what's happening, but that's what he says here. And then in the second point, you can see he's complaining that Assange's team submitted 8 points and over 100 papers in total. And once again, he says you're trying to rerun the case. The judge, he then complains that there's fresh evidence being submitted. And, I find this very, very funny, because I was in the court when the Americans were portraying these federal supermax prisons as summer camps where if you have good behavior and you really rehabilitate yourself, then there's a program where you can unlock new perks, right? And they have an arts and crafts program. I mean, I couldn't believe that they were serious, because they were trying to portray it as something that's not sinister. Like this is not a hellhole, which is what the warden of the prison, a former warden, called it. He said it's a hellhole. So that was the American position in court the entire time, the entire 4 weeks. And then once the Americans lost the case, all of a sudden, now they're saying, oh no, we're not going to put Julian Assange in a federal supermax. Oh no. Here's a diplomatic note that is completely ambiguous and abstract and allows us to do whatever we want. We totally promise that we won't go back on our word. So that is what happened. The Americans appealed after losing, right? So they lost on January 4th of 2021. They lost. And then a month later, this diplomatic or verbal note comes out of nowhere. And the judges roll with it. So they didn't complain like, oh, this is fresh evidence. Oh, you have completely reversed your position. How dare you appeal? Oh, no. They not only allowed the Americans to go ahead with their appeal on 3 grounds, but all 5 grounds were permitted, okay? So the Americans were allowed to appeal on all of the grounds that they had asked for. Meanwhile, Julian Assange is allowed to appeal on 0 in both of these rulings. 0. Not a single ground did this justice cede to Julian's team. Not a single ground. It gets better. Let's take a look at point 3. What did our Mr. Swift Justice say here? So he said that the decision on Section 81 of the 2003 Extradition Act, that the district court judge, meaning the lower court, her conclusion is fine. What is Section 81, first of all? Well, Section 81 is something that clearly says you cannot extradite someone, in this case Julian Assange, to another country if you know that this prisoner will face a politicized trial, meaning he'll be treated unfairly by the requesting state, that this requesting state will have a bias against him. This requesting state will forbid him his right to a fair trial and due process, etc., etc. And so he's saying here that, well, the conclusion reached by the lower court that, this is not a political trial and it's totally fine to extradite him. I mean, Christ, you couldn't ask for a more political trial. I have extraordinary trouble believing that these people who are high court judges, they're extremely intelligent. They know exactly what they're doing, make no mistake. How on earth do you write something like this knowing who the prisoner is? You know who Julian Assange is. You know what the CIA is. You know what the United States do. This is the very ink on this paper is politicized. The words coming out of my mouth are politicized. This entire case is shrouded in politics. We're not talking about some common criminal here, okay? Julian Assange is a journalist. He's published a lot of factual, true documents showing US war crimes. They have every reason in the world to go after him. As a matter of fact, after the Vault 7 leaks, so when Julian Assange and WikiLeaks published a cache of documents showing the CIA's hacking tools, you saw what Mike Pompeo, then the CIA director, called WikiLeaks. He declared war on them and said WikiLeaks is a hostile, non-state intelligence service. So to act like Julian Assange will receive some kind of fair trial in the United States, I mean, I'm sorry, but if you're going to extradite someone based on a political offense, at least have the courage to just admit it. Spare him the trouble and time that and the years, for he has spent 4 years alone in Belmarsh, for never mind cooped up in the Ecuadorian embassy before that. And the way in which this is written, I mean, this is, it's something fascinating, honestly. If you look at the last point at number 12, he says that it is essential for grounds of appeal to be pleaded concisely and clearly. This is the only way to ensure that one party's case can be properly and proportionately addressed by the other parties to the claim. The present grounds of appeal are unwieldy and do not comply with any known principles of pleading. I mean, I find this completely shocking, honestly. So, this brings us to our second ruling. Also, no dice for Mr. Assange. He's not allowed to appeal. And once again, this was Julian Assange asking to appeal the Home Secretary or Secretary of State's decision to extradite him to the United States. So, in reason number 3, Mr. Swift Justice is saying that the Secretary of State took her decision only by reference to the provisions of the 2003 Act, and she was correct to do so. Well, here's the 2003 Extradition Treaty, not Act. So now you're sitting there going at your screen, Richard, what are you trying to tell us? You see, this is the document that was signed between the United States and the United Kingdom. This is the international accord. But then you have to go translate that into your own country's law. So in the case of the United Kingdom, in England and Wales, this is not the Extradition Treaty. It's known as the Extradition Act. And mysteriously, Article 4 of the Extradition Treaty, I just can't find it in the Extradition Act. It doesn't exist. Shall I read Article 4 to you? Article 4 of the Extradition Treaty says that extradition shall not be granted if the offense for which extradition is requested is a political offense. Guess what? It is. It's a political offense. But for some reason, we can't find this Article 4 in the British equivalent of this treaty. I mean, I call that shady as hell. They left this out on purpose. This was 2003, so that they could green light and rubber stamp extraditions from the UK to the United States, to Guantanamo Bay, or wherever else the DOJ and BOP deem fit for your visit. Seriously, take a guess how many Americans are coming the other way, right? From the United States to the UK. You know what the answer is? 0 or very little. Ansakoulis, CIA spy who killed a British teenager on his bike because she was driving on the wrong side of the road and then fled. She literally did a hit and run and fled to the United States. When Harry Dunn's parents, that's the boy's name, when Harry Dunn's parents asked for her to be extradited and face justice, the response from the US government was, "You're out of your mind." I wonder why our government is so keen on just, shipping hordes of people, from journalists to people that are accused of terrorism, over to the United States. So eager to just hand them over. Here's another good one. So let's look at reason number 5. The judge here says that ground 2 is that it is possible that charges the appellant presently faces, which do not attract the death penalty, could be replaced by different charges based on the same evidence which do attract the death penalty. So he says for the reasons at paragraph 12 of the respondent's notice, this ground is not arguable. So just to translate this, Julian Assange's lawyers are saying that if Julian is extradited, there's a good chance that the Department of Justice or the US government will change what he's accused of. They'll change the indictment, which they have already done before, right? And they'll give him something that will warrant the death penalty, for example, right? Or the electric chair, right? And they'll do a bait and switch. So as soon as he's in US jurisdiction, there's no telling what they'll do to him. Now, there's legal precedent for this. You've had people shipped off to the United States, and then when they got there, all of a sudden, oh, the indictment's changed. How nice. I find this incredible that this judge has such confidence in the DOJ, because David Mendoza, who is a good friend of mine and who I interviewed and whose case I reported on, is intertwined with Julian Assange's. Do you know why? Because this entire case, the only reason that the UK is allowing Julian Assange to be taken to the US is because we have accepted in Britain a diplomatic note from the Americans promising that they will take good care of him. How? Oh, by allowing him to serve, a 175-year prison sentence, but in Australia, right? And that they swear they won't put him in a federal supermax. When I was in court, they were saying for 4 weeks that they want to do nothing more and nothing less than put him in a supermax. Why do we so eagerly and blindly believe this diplomatic note? Because you are hoping, you think the Americans will keep their word. But I have physical, tangible proof to the contrary that I have published that they don't want you to see. Because let me tell you something. When David Mendoza was also extradited to the United States, he not only received a diplomatic note, he in Spain, the country where he's also a citizen, he's a dual citizen. When he was also extradited to the United States, he not only received a diplomatic note, he received something even better, a written and signed contract by himself, the Spanish government, and the American government. All of this to satisfy the Spaniards that once David Mendoza is sentenced, he can be sent back to Spain to serve out his sentence near his family, right? Because that's a staple of the Strasbourg prisoner transfer treaty, right? What do you think happened when David Mendoza was sentenced in the United States? Do you think they sent him back? He had to fight tooth and nail to get his own government. He had to fight tooth and nail to force them to abide by the contract. At first, they wouldn't even give him a copy. They said, "Oh, we can't give you a copy. This is a diplomatic communication. You're not privy to that. It's classified." He signed it, and they're telling him it's classified. And then they gave him a version without his signature, so he couldn't contest anything in court. And then when he finally got the original with all 3 signatures, he sued the United States Attorney General Eric Holder, and only when he did that did they finally respect and keep their word and send him back to Spain so he could serve out his sentence near his family. Julian Assange will never get a contract for anything from the United States, not even for a cup of water. If you think this diplomatic note, which is, I mean, just if you speak English and can read, you know that they can wiggle their way out of this just like that. It is so ambiguous. It is so abstract and open to a million interpretations that it is nothing but gibberish. Never mind a contract. I mean, these judges, I don't know what to say. They are so keen and eager to believe lies from a government that has shown that I have proven does not respect its word when it comes to extraditions. If you think the United States are going to treat Julian Assange with 1 ounce of dignity, you are out of your mind. I'm not talking about the judges. I'm talking about anyone who thinks this. Julian Assange right now should be free because the documents that I published prove you cannot trust the United States contracts, never mind diplomatic notes. Julian and his lawyers have 5 days to appeal, which they will. Stella Assange's wife announced that they will. He will get 2 new judges who hopefully see more reason than their predecessors and will not allow Julian Assange to be thrown to the wolves, locked up in some hellhole in the United States in Colorado for 175 years. Have we no shame? Have we no shame to allow something like this? One of the finest journalists, and this is how we reward them. What does that say about press freedoms? What does that say about how we treat our journalists and our press corps?